Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to day 5 of our whole trilogy situation. Today we're continuing on in Scientology. Yes, and today I want to break down this whole concept of the reactive mind, and I want to talk about something that L. Ron Hubbard said, which is that man is basically good. The more you make him free, the better his behavior is. So before we get too much into this, I'm going to break down my understanding of this concept of the reactive mind, because I have spoken about it. I haven't really broken it down, and it's one of the key points. It's probably the most important point about Scientology that reels people in, because as I said, as you guys know, I went to do one of their personality tests and get the graph and then sit with one of their people who tells you about yourself, explains to you this, that, and the other. And this was a huge concept that I have to admit, all the clips I've seen of L. Ron Hubbard and also what the gentleman that I met said all was exactly the same. So they do a good job of teaching their people. But of course they do, otherwise they wouldn't be so freaking successful, right? But let me talk to you guys about the reactive mind, so that we have, when we're talking about stuff going forward, we all have an understanding of exactly what this stuff actually is, right? So that's why I'm making this video for you guys, because a lot of the people that speak about this stuff, I'm not gonna lie, they talk about the effects, but I also want to, before we get to the effects and how it's affected people, I really want to hone in on what this actually is, like what this is. Because as somebody who's a Christian, as a Bible, and I say Christian, I mean Christian as in how the Bible means it, as in I'm a follower of Christ, of Jesus Christ, right? Not whatever other extras you have heard of other Christians, follower of Jesus Christ. And this is case in point, my point here, right? In me coming to know God, I have to know God as who he is, as what his principles, who he is as a person, is more important than what other people are as experiences, to an extent, in terms of evaluating God. Because if I'm going to evaluate God, I want to start with who he is and the core of what it means for him to be God, his Bible, etc., etc. So in the same way, I want to do the same with Scientology, right? Well, let's go to the root so that we can see how we get from there to what we see on the outside, right? So as far as Scientology and the reactive mind, now this is literally the most fundamental theory I think that they have, partnering with this whole that man is mostly good with evil added and all this stuff, right? Which we're going to come back to that in this video. But basically what the reactive mind is another word almost for like your subconscious. Now, they would not necessarily say it's directly equal, but L. Ron Hubbard himself kind of described a reactive mind as something that is like around you, and your spirit is in the inside, in the core of your reactive mind. And your reactive mind is something that you're not necessarily aware of, you can't access it, but it affects your daily life. And he specifically talks about how your reactive mind is a storage space of all of the negative experiences that you've had, and your reactive mind affects you subconsciously or unconsciously, subconsciously, and is the reason why us as humans don't behave as good as we can, because we have to remove those things. We have these limitations that come from our reactive mind. So before we delve deeper into that, I'll just further explain something that he said out of his own mouth. And he basically explained it in one way of saying that it's like when we think from A to B, right? But because of all of these things that are in our brain doesn't get straight to B because it gets disrupted. So the whole purpose of, in terms of being A to B, he's talking about freedom, like your ability to be free, your ability to have clarity, because clarity was the number one thing that came up even in my whole graph evaluation. It was like, you need to be clarity. You have to have clarity in who you are and just kind of go for who you are. Because one thing that's a little bit sinister that L. Ron Hubbard said that not enough people, I feel like, have spoken about, is he specifically talked about how, that we all have a right to, he says that we all do right and we all will do right. A lot of us, according to him, you make man is basically good, the more you make him free, the better his behavior is. He goes on to say, man is not evil, not an evil beast who gets worse and worse. He gets better with Scientology. So his viewpoint is that if you can disrupt, if we can remove the ability for disruption of you second guessing yourself in any way, shape, and form, then every decision you make, everything you want to do, you'll just go straight into doing it. Nothing will stop you. But a lot of people don't get to make that kind of decision or don't have that clarity because there's other things disrupting it, which according to him is sorry, this is so annoying. Which according to him is, what was I even saying? Man does not even get to work. Yeah, Scientology. Oh yeah, which according to him, if you remove all of this reactive mind malarkey, right, all of this stuff that's stored in there because of pain and trauma, which we're going to come to in a minute, then you'll be able to have clarity. Then man will be able to be good with their free will, right? With our freedom, it will result in something good. Now, the sinister thing that he said, that I don't know if people picked up on, is he said that, well, somebody in their clarity might want to become a duck, go hunting for ducks. Now, the problem becomes is that obviously if your perspective is from the duck, then that person doesn't necessarily look like a good person. And he kind of just offhandedly said it, which I really thought about, because what he's essentially saying is that he's acknowledging that in the freedom that we are all striving for and also going to receive as this removal of this so-called reactive mind, the person that will be brought out, the freedom of us who is so-called good, he's essentially saying that we get to be good even if what the perception of somebody else's perception of what we're doing is bad to them, i.e., and this is where I now get why he relates to somebody like Cecil Rhodes, because if he says he reckons he was like Cecil Rhodes in his past life, as I mentioned before, guys, Cecil Rhodes is the guy who was there, the what do you call it, the colony prime minister in Rhodesia, which is now known as Zambia and Zimbabwe. So to go with this concept of, you doing what you is right for you and being free and being considered good, but it might be considered not good from a different perspective. In that case, you could say that Cecil Rhodes felt that he wanted to, he was in Rhodesia, obviously. He'd moved there because of his ill health. If you guys want to know more about this Cecil Rhodes thing, I talk about it in one of the earlier videos about on this series. So you can look at somebody like Cecil Rhodes and then you can go, okay, he wanted to dominate the diamond industry in Zimbabwe and Zambia. And so if he went through Scientology, he could remove anything stopping him in his reactive mind from pursuing that, and therefore would run into doing that 100 miles per hour. And that would be him being good and him having an understanding of his beingness, having a strong beingness, right? Which is your ability to handle your environment. Again, same thing that was said by L. Ron Hubbard, same thing that was said to me when I went to this personality test thing. So, but then the problem becomes that from the perspective of the other people who are actually there, they might not see you as good. And this is where I think his whole thing of just leaving good and evil up to like, oh, good and evil is whatever society says it is. Yeah, go back to the video from yesterday if you don't know what I'm talking about, because I broke down why us all just thinking that we all have like the same moral compass that's not specified is problematic. So go and check that out in the previous video. So let's talk about this and talking about this as far as the reactive mind. So what he's saying is that our reactive mind is built up by all of the pain and trauma and traumatic events that we've all had in our lives up until this point, right? And they're affecting how we behave, right? Which I do see a truth to this. This is why I said this man is incredibly intelligently heinous, right? Because he takes the truth, this is exactly what Satan does, takes truth, adds something that seems like not that big of an issue with it. It's so truthful that you don't question the fact that it doesn't all make sense, right? Because what he's saying is that we have all these issues, all these pain and trauma that's stored in our reactive mind, or as we would call it, our subconscious, that we currently don't have access to because, again, as is truthful, as is scientific, right? that even in science, it's true that our brain does tend to hide from us painful things that we've been through in our subconscious, because our brain is wired for us to survive. Our brain is wired to keep us surviving and going forward. So if our brain has calculated that bringing up this stuff from the past is going to destroy us, it's going to stop our ability to survive, which, let's remember, survival is a thing that Hubbard observed is what all people all over the world, whether primitive or cultural, according to his words, his terminologies, had in common, is our needing to survive. And that's how he became who he was, because he studied that, he observed it. Then he wrote this book that he wrote, that somebody asked him to write, can you put your research together? And then he came up with his book, which I have the DVD of right here, Dianetics, how to use Dianetics, which talks about that, and then that built into Scientology. So the whole purpose of all of that is that, he's observed that we need to we focus on survival. That's one thing, no matter what race, no matter what country, no matter what economic status, primitive or cultural, that we all have in common, right? And so let's go back to the brain and survival. So our brain does scientifically hide things from us, because in order for us to be able to survive, that's why a lot of people, it takes a lot of work in therapy, or for somebody like myself in prayer with the Lord, to bring up stuff that needs to be dealt with, because a lot of times, as Hubbard is saying, those things do affect you. They do affect how you conduct yourself. Sometimes you don't even know how those things are affecting yourself, because you haven't experienced, or you haven't seen the effect, but it's affecting you. So his thing is, let's not let these things affect you. Let's remove all of those things. Then you can come into the fullness of your beingness, the fullness of clarity, right? And therefore you can go straight from A to B with your decisions. And therefore you, as a man who's mostly good, right, will now be able to take your mostly goodness. And according to him, if left alone, you would do good, and you would, with your freedom, you would do, what is it he says? I have it written down here. The more that we're left freely, the better our behavior is, right? Which, if you ask me, the fact that people have to engage in Scientology in the first place already proves that doesn't make sense. Because if we were, the more that we're free, the better we behave, then why do we need Scientology to help us to behave better? Surely, if the more free we are, the better we behave, then that would just be something that would just fulfill itself all by itself, right? And so his process is, we're going to help dig into, this is what all this auditing and all of this stuff is all about. We're going to dig into your reactive mind. We're going to help you go to your reactive mind, find these things that are affecting you, deal with them, remove them, and then you can now step into this life where you're not dealing with all these things in your reactive mind. Because the idea is to just remove it completely, because your reactive mind is what's preventing you from doing and becoming who you're supposed to be, right? And so that's the concept of this whole reactive mind thing. Now, all of that sounds amazing. All of that sounds great, right? Even I'm a believer, is not in what he's saying, but I'm a believer that we do need to deal with the things. I've said this to you guys before. We do need to deal with the things that we've been through, and we need to address them, because they do affect us, and they affect us in ways that we don't always necessarily realize. Now, my way of doing these things is with God and with the Holy Spirit, because in due course, when you're close with the Lord, God will take you on a journey, step by step, in the right time, in the right season, in the right way. He will deal with whatever it is, bring it up to your attention. Like I said, God reveals to heal. You heal it, and then you move forward, right? And then you're like, oh, so I was being affected by this. This was restricting my ability to have this or this. This type of process always brings you closer to God. This type of process always does bring you clarity when it comes to God. This is where we have to look at why this is an issue as far as Scientology is concerned. Because with Scientology, it seems that this is a never-ending process. It seems that there's always 100 different new things that need to be addressed. As case in point, Aaron, I believe his name's Aaron Smith. Why can't I remember this man's name? He came out to say that, he's the one who speaks a lot about this, and his channel's the one. Yeah, Aaron Smith Levin. I like him because his channel, obviously, is the one growing up in Scientology. And his perspective on things is he breaks a lot of the the real doctrines, because the funny thing is L. Ron Hubbard tried his best to make it seem as though like this isn't like one of those overly doctrinal based types of religions. We're just here to help you remove the stuff that's blocking you. We just believe that on your own you'll progress fantastically on your own. You might just need to remove this stuff that's becoming a blockage to you, which again, like I said, is something we can all relate to. But one thing I like a lot of things that Aaron has specifically pointed out, because he's kind of pointing out more the realities of the inconsistencies of Scientology. So one of the things that he pointed out and he spoke about is how, first of all, let's just address something real quick here. Scientology as it is a very public but yet extremely private organization. It reminds me a lot of Freemasons, where like Freemasons, you can go on their website, you can see all this stuff, just like you can with Scientology. You can go on the website, you can see all this stuff. By the way, guys, we are going to talk about the billionaire contract, because I've got a lot to say about that, especially because scientists have actually made whole scientific papers analyzing that, which for me is insane as a scientist. Also, I want to wait to watch the Leah Remini documentary as well before I discuss this contract, because I have a lot to say about the contract. Also, if you haven't watched my contracts playlist on YouTube, go and watch it, please, because yeah, especially the video where I talk about sin being a contract. Go and check that out, because that will be a nice little intro video about sin, how sin is a contract. Go and check it out. And that'll be a good intro video for what I'm going to talk about with that. But anyways, what was I saying? Oh yes, so he was saying, Aaron Smith Levin was saying that there's a public version that makes it seem like, hey, all trustworthy. Yeah, you can go and walk into somewhere and get a free personality test. In Scientology, there's nothing weird going on. There's nothing behind the scenes that will there's nothing that we're hiding from you. We're not some weird cult that's like unapproachable, or that you can't find somewhere, or that has these secret meetings. Well, Aaron had something else to say about that, because he has spoken a lot about this whole confidential hierarchy of Scientology. So let's backtrack to this reactive mind thing. L. Ron Hubbard believes that the first thing that they do, which I can tell you because I've got this thing here. Let's pop this bad boy open, because I was looking at this as I was planning to film. So in the How to Use Dianetics, right? Here we go. This book right here. So in this book, it's telling you how to use this, and it goes through all the steps of what you're supposed to do when you're auditing. I understand. So the basic Dianetics procedure, right? So it says, assure the pre-clear he or she will know everything that happens. So I know from reading further into this that this is basically to help somebody this is basically like a guide for somebody to help audit somebody else, which the auditing thing we're going to come back to. Just follow me and we'll get there. So it has all this: tell the pre-clear, which I believe is a person being audited, you'll remain aware of everything which goes on. You'll be able to remember everything that happens here. You can pull yourself out of anything which you get into if you don't like it. I really don't trust that, but anyway. Then it says, have the pre-clear close his or her eyes. Tell the pre-clear, in the future, when I utter the word cancelled, everything which I have said to you while you're in the therapy session, which they tried to claim that this isn't therapy when I went to the session that I went to with this, my own thing that I told you guys about, that I went to, will be cancelled and will have no force with you. Any suggestion I have made to you without force when I say the word cancelled. Do you understand? And then it says, let's go to the earliest moment of pain or discomfort. So that's where they're getting you now. And they do these things called engrams, this engram thing, which we'll talk about engrams separately. But what I want to talk about here is the earliest memory, the earliest moment of pain or discomfort. Now, according to L. Ron Hubbard, and this really upsets me, this particular fact, the earliest, most painful memory for all of us as humans is being born. It's being born. That's supposed to be our most painful, the earliest memory of pain or discomfort. And so pretty much what he's suggesting is that if you go and do this auditing, this processing, these are the words they use for the stuff that you do. If you sign up, right, you'll be audited, you'll go through processing, which for me is just the word processing in and of itself is a bit of a wild word to use. Then what will the result of you going through all those stages will be that you come out on the other side by getting all the way back. Ideally, you get all the way back to that first moment. And when you get to that first moment of the day you were born, if you can draw that out of your reactive mind, right? Remember, it's something that's stored in your mind, but you just can't access it because it's painful and your brain has pushed it to the back, right? But you actually can remember that if you're audited, if somebody goes through these steps of, and you go through this engram thing and all of this, then what happens? This is insane. Anyway, we'll look at this properly another time. I can't believe what I just saw. Oh gosh, I can't believe what I just saw. Anyways. Anyway, if you remove this memory of being born, then if you can get all that far back, then you can remove everything else. Then you will have removed your reactive mind. Now you can be yourself. Now you as a human who left freely would behave better, supposedly, can we behave the best. Now this lack of clarity that you have is gone. Now you are clear about what you want to do and you can move forward and progress as a person and progress, whatever that means. Because a lot of this is super individualized, which again I have an issue with, because if we're over individualizing things, actions, we live in a world together, guys. So everything that we do, it affects each other, right? It's like how relationships, how communities work. How you are in your community affects everybody. If all of us in our community, let's say if you live in a town, you live all on a certain road name, if everybody decides that they're going to litter individually, then all together, we all have created together a community space that's filled with litter, right? If we all decide that we're not going to litter and throw our trash on the floor, then we are collectively, as society, decided that we are keeping our community clean. In the same way that if one person decides that they're going to litter in all of the community as much as they want to, then that person has now affected the whole community. And so that's why I have a problem with just assuming that we're just talking about people as if we're just these individual beings that don't affect everybody else, right? That's the issue I have with all of this. So then his thing is like, oh, we remove this reactive mind. Woohoo! Now you can go on and be free. But like I said, he did mention that thing that in the same moment that you're being good might be considered bad to somebody else. Now, if you were to apply that logic, there's a lot of very problematic people, both in history and today, who could arguably say that they did their actions because they had been freed from their reactive mind. And I believe that's exactly what's heinous about all of this. This is why I think L. Ron Hubbard is a genius. He's found a way to pretty much embed the law of Satan into the very core of what he believes, which the law of Satan is do whatever you want, do whatever you want, right? Do what thou wilt. That's the law of Satan. Do what thou wilt. Like I always say, guys, everything's opposite in the opposite kingdoms. The holy God of the Bible, the real one true living God of the kingdom of light, he has a whole bunch of scriptures, a whole bunch of clarifications of ways that we should live healthy boundaries in order to maintain a healthy, thriving community, right? The kingdom of darkness has one law, and a very selfish one. Do what thou wilt. Do whatever you want. Even if you think about when Jesus was asked, what are the two most important commandments in the Bible? What did he say? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Put God before anything else, right? Because whenever we make ourselves gods, we are wrong, and we throw ourselves into hell. We are creating hell on earth right now. I was thinking about this today, by the way, or yesterday, or the day before, but I was thinking how we're actually creating hell. Like, people are worried about going to hell. I'm like, have you realized that we're creating hell? Like, on earth, we're creating it right now. Like, I don't know what people think. Like, people are like, oh, I'm scared to go to hell. I'm like, you're creating it every day. We're creating hell. Look at the world we live in. Imagine where the world's going to be 2,000 years from now, for example. We're creating hell. You're worried about going to hell. We're creating it as we are, right? And then he secondly says, you shall love thy neighbor as yourself, as in you can't just live with only yourself as the viewpoint. You've got to live with you and everyone. Love God, and see how he covers all three areas in 2 scriptures. And he's actually, somebody else pointed this out, that those 2 commandments are actually just a summary of the 10 original commandments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Honor your mother. You shall have no other gods before me. What is it? You shall have no other gods before me. Where's my Bible? It's right here. Exodus 20. I'm pretty sure, isn't it? The 10 Commandments. It's funny. It's one of those passages that I do remember where it is, but I rarely read it because I don't know, guys. I just rarely read it. Exodus 20. The 10 Commandments. I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven or above, or that is on earth, beneath, or the water that is underneath the earth. Oh, interesting. He even talks about water underneath the earth. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Now God's talking about the water. We weren't talking about the water before and what was in the water and whether we should be making gods of things in the water prior, but now we're talking about it. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord, am a jealous God, visiting the remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Okay, so yes, it's true. So the first half of the commandments are about, God and putting God in his place, loving him with all your heart, soul, and mind, and strength and everything. And then the last 5 are about relationships with others, loving your neighbor as yourself. So first of all, you've got to love yourself well, and then you've got to love your neighbors as well as you love yourself. Wouldn't the world be a perfect place if we lived like that? But listen, what L. Ron Hubbard is suggesting is quite the opposite, and quite the opposite of what he's suggesting. He's suggesting let's just all remove all the limitations. In fact, let's go there for a second. So in terms of this reactive mind, we'll come back to the other thing I was going to say about the confidential stuff. So what he's saying is, because what I believe is the stuff that sometimes stops us from doing whatever is the first thing that comes to our mind is the thoughts to do with community. It's the thoughts of others. It's the thoughts of God, right? The reason why, to go back to my example of littering in your community, the reason why, although you could happily live your whole life littering away as much as you want to and not worrying about it, because it can affect, somebody will have to deal with it, and whoever it is, at least it's not you. A lot of people live that way of like, I'm going to live my life because at least I don't have to deal with the consequences of what comes after. Who did this in the Bible? Oh my gosh, who was it? I'm trying to remember. It was somebody I remember I was filled with anger when I read this. Who was it in the Bible? There was somebody in the Bible in the Old Testament, and they were like, yep, I'm happily going to just do what I'm going to do and be selfish because my kids will be the ones who have to deal with this. And I thought this is one of the most demonic things ever. Anyway, and then God rebuked them for it. Oh, I'm going to see if I can find it while I'm talking. So, so basically, if you decide you're going to do that, then yes, now you are affecting your community. You're not loving your neighbor as yourself, because in your own house, you're probably not littering in there. You're probably keeping it tidy. But when it's the rest of the world, when it's where somebody else is or everybody else is, now you're being selfish, right? And so, yeah, it's actually promoting selfishness. And that is almost the truest form of evil if you think about it. Because if you think about the most heinous forms of evil that exist in the world today, it's the people who have an entitled sense of selfishness, the people who feel entitled to do whatever they want, take whatever they want to take, and have whatever they want to have despite everybody else. And that's where a lot of the sins, if you think about it, the most heinous ones come from things like greed, things like pride, things like envy. These are the types of sins that all involve entitlement and selfishness, you know what I'm saying? And stuff like that. And so I find that quite fascinating that for him to suggest that men are mostly good when left to themselves, our behavior will improve. But that just doesn't make any sense, because why? Well, I guess it depends what your metric is. If your metric is as far as us as a collective of people on earth, will we overall improve? Absolutely not. Now, will your perception of yourself improve and your entitlement? Yes. And it's actually funny, because even when I did this graph thing, this personality test, even there they were telling me that the test isn't an evaluation of what we think of you, it's about what you think of yourself. And I was just like, okay, so basically it is very self-centered, it is very self-driven in and of itself, right? Is that like sorry, let me just search this quickly. I may or may not find it, but we'll see. If we do, we do. If we don't, we don't. Yeah. So, what was I saying? Yeah. So actually, the heart of this whole concept is pure selfishness, and selfishness, for me, is the closest thing to evil behavior. Because if you think about it, what happened in the Garden of Eden, right? What happened in the Garden of Eden was that you have Eve. This is why I'm particularly offended by Eve. Can I just say, Eve really offends me as a woman, because I just think, like, you're in a position where God has given you, he's given you everything, right? He's given you the world. He's given you himself. He's given, as in himself, God. He's given you a man. He's given you this incredible man, Adam, who's already woken up. He's already sorting everything out, yada, yada, yada. All you had to do was follow this one thing. In your greed and selfishness, ladies and gentlemen, is what has led for the world to be what it is today. So the truth is actually the complete opposite of what L. Ron Hubbard is saying. He is saying that, I keep referring back to it because I wrote down exactly what he was saying. Man is not an evil beast who gets worse and worse. He gets better with Scientology. And I just want to counteract that with, that is incorrect. It is absolutely incorrect, because at the end of the day, I'm going to leave this verse. I'm so glad the story came up, though. Maybe I'll research it after I film for whenever next time. If you guys haven't looked at the Bible, read the Bible and look at the world. The Bible tells us that from that first selfish act that Eve made, all the way up until now, and then until beyond, right, into Revelations, which will be the next video I'll be filming. Shout out to those of you guys watching the Revelation series, and shout out to everybody who's watching this. This is so cool. I'm having so much fun. And it's so cool just that you guys anybody's tuning into it. I'm like, oh, this is so much fun. Yeah, us left alone, we do get worse. We do get worse. And the way I look at it is, as we go through history, we are further and further separated from God. So we're actually walking more and more in freedom. We are being more and more freedom. And guess what? Is that leading to our behavior improving? No, it's not. Although maybe on our own merit, we would consider it as behaving better. You know why? Because we're selfish. Just like how you see people in the world today demanding for everybody to acknowledge every single thing about them. Oh, you need to acknowledge my pain. Like, I could be sitting here like, every single white person, you need to just do this because I'm black, and you need to acknowledge my pain, and da, da, da. No, we're not going to do that. That's not how it runs, right? That's selfish. That's very, very selfish. I'm just another human being. You're just another human being. We all create this world together. It's not about me. And I only use that as an example because obviously I'm not part of any of these, like LGBTQ+, for example, is another community that's highly entitled. The black community, highly entitled in a selfish way. You serve me, I feel this way about how I feel, and you need to do what I feel. Not this respect for a community where we can all coexist and everybody should be allowed to live the life their way that they want to, and we respect everybody's, as humans, we expect everybody as equals. No, I decide that I'm going to be entitled. That's selfishness that comes straight from the pits of hell. And that's the result of what? Us being further away, removed from God, us having more freedom. Because see how having more freedom, even in Western society, in just the last however many years, has caused for us to become worse. I was saying to somebody, we just had Halloween. We didn't need to have, no one needed to dress up. The world is already the horror show. We are already the horror. Halloween is already here. We're already the horror story. So yeah, that's the reactive mind. This so-called reactive mind business is to pretty much remove everything that I believe God puts inside of us. Some of it is inside of us. Some of us does need to be removed. A lot of it does need to be removed. But a lot of it is actually just our ability to actually sympathize, empathize, and live on a planet peacefully with others, and understand that it's not all about me. It's not all about I. It's not about me doing whatever I want, because there should be things that prevent me from just running straight forward. And not all of it is the reactive mind and the pain and trauma of the past. A lot of it is wisdom, compassion, and genuine love that comes straight from God. So, anyways, guys, if life's a game, let's play to win. See you in day 6. God bless you all, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.